Welcome to the Alakus channel. This is going to be class number 7 in the Maimer Oita Kasama, which is the second discourse of the Greater Sefer, B'Shashak Dimu 5672. I'm speaking a little lower here because I'm actually at an airport and I'm trying to give this class. So on this powerful day of Gimel Tammuz, we are able to learn some Chassidus together. In any case, we are holding in the middle of, we started chapter 6, which is the sixth chapter, Perek Vav, in the general Sefer. So, yesterday we were learning how the relationship of the lights and the vessels is that, similar to the human experience of chapter 1, that the light goes into the vessel, and the vessel, because the vessel so absorbs the light, the vessel leaves an imprint on the light, which means makes the energy affect in accordance to the manner of the vessels, not in its complete abstract form that the light would affect if it would be on its own. So how does he apply it to the, and in the human experience we learned the fact that all the experiences of the soul in the body become physicalized as opposed to them being in the pure spiritual form when they would not be invested in the body. So the same is regarding when we talk about the cosmic soul, the oiros, the divine lights that vest themselves in the vessels of the Sefirot. When these lights vest themselves in the vessels of the Sefirot, the manner in which what happens is that they're so absorbed in these vessels that the vessels have an impact on the manner in which the energy is going to produce. So we learned yesterday that the bringing about of the creation of the worlds is through the medium of the Sefirot. And in the Sefirot itself, the main power to produce, it's a joint collaboration between the energy and the vessel. The energy is the primary force that has the capability to be able to produce something from non-existent. And the reason for that is because the lights reflect the source. This is a very important rule. Or me'ein hamor, a light is always a reflection of the source. Whatever the source is, the light will express. If that's the case, since the source over here is an omnipotent being that can do the impossible, so the light can also do the impossible. Yesterday I mentioned I would add another even deeper reason why to create something from nothing requires requires only not the light, but the essence of God. But the light is able to do it because the light reflects the essence. And that is the fact that to create a creation, to create a being that doesn't have a source, means something that doesn't come from anything, right? That's the basic idea, to create something new, something from nothing, something that doesn't come from anything. Now, to have that power, you can only do that if you yourself have, if the source, the one that's creating, also doesn't have a source. If you're a source-based entity whose entire existence comes from a source, then you cannot produce something stronger than yourself. So to create something that doesn't have a source, that's what yesh me'ayin means, something that is sourceless, the being that's producing it can also only be someone that is sourceless. But who is sourceless? Every level of any kind of being is obviously created by God. We're created, so we don't have power to create something without a source, because our source is Hashem. So everything, and even all the divine levels and stages of divinity, they all come from somewhere. In other words, any type of light that there is in the higher worlds, every light comes from somewhere. It means it has a source and that ultimately everything traces itself back to the divine essence. But the divine being himself, the essence of God, which we refer to as Atzmos, this very substance of God himself, he doesn't come from anywhere. He is because he is. No one produced him. He's a self-sufficient being, so to speak. He's the absolute existence that exists completely from within himself, not from any other external source. That's why he's the only one who has the ability to create a being without a source. Now, however, that's him. Now, how does he express that? He expresses that through his light. So it's almost like he takes the potency. It's not almost, that's what he does. The potent power that only he himself possesses, he expresses it via the light. He empowers the light to do that. So the light is able to do that. But the vessels, they don't have that power because they're not a reflection of the source, as we discussed yesterday. Quite on the contrary, the whole point of a vessel is that something new comes out, something that we don't notice in the source. The vessels are very defined. They're limited, specified beings, and the source is undefined. So vessels are not an expression of the source. Therefore, they do, as great as they are, they do not have the power to create something from nothing. However, they play a major role in the entire process of it. Because what type of creation did God create? He created a creation in which the beings of the created reality have a sense of separation, they have a sense of self. And that sense of self that they possess, that independence, a creature, a creation feels independent and has a beingness, although, as we discussed earlier, that power is only the essence of God to do so, but the act to bring it about in the practical sense would not be able to come from the light. If the light would create the world directly, just pure light, the creations would be nullified in the light that's creating it. In other words, like it says in Tanya, in the second part of Tanya, Sha'ar Yichud V'Emunah, in which he compares creations to rays of light coming from a source, and the source would be the sun in our case. By creations, the source is God, or the Word of God that creates the divine energy that's creating the world. That would be the source. So, and he explains that just like when the sun emanates rays of light, the rays of light only have an existence when they're outside of the sun. But these very same rays of light, if you would go into the sun itself, you wouldn't see the ray. You would only see the sun itself, the sun globe. You wouldn't see its rays. They would be completely canceled. Imagine if we traveled into the sun. We wouldn't see any rays. We would just be in the sun and just see the sun. So the same is also creation. Every creation is just a ray, a reflection of the divine power. And however, because God is everywhere, so these reflections never leave him. You can't say it left God. Like by the sun, you can say the rays and the lights go out of the sun. But by God, nothing leaves him because he's everywhere. So everything is still contained within the source. So we should all be nullified in the source. So the creations should not exist with a consciousness, with a state of separation. So if God would truly create the world purely just from light, that's the type of creation that would result. A reality that exists but would have no awareness of its own existence. It would only know its source. It would drown, if we might say it this way, it would be drowned in its source. Because in the sun, it doesn't mean that there are no rays. The rays of the sun are in the sun. It's a funny use on the sun to say that the rays are drowned out by the sun. But that's the idea. They're canceled in the source. So if God was to create the world from pure light, not through the vessels, then the creation that would result would be a drowned out creation, a creation that is completely lost in the Or Ein Sof, in the infinite being. However, God didn't want such a creation, because the whole point of a creation was that we should have free choice and we should feel ourselves and we have choices to make and we can choose to invite God into our lives or to dismiss him. So therefore, what did God do? He created the creation in a way that the source should not be felt in the creations. In other words, we would feel like we're outside of our source. How is that possible? That's because he creates us through the energy, but via the vessels. In other words, the energy passes through the vessels. And because they go through the vessels are a block, a concealment. The light, as we discussed earlier, light is revelation, expression. Vessels are the opposite, concealment and obstruction. Since the light comes through the vessels contribute concealment to the product. That which is produced is now produced in concealment. It's produced in the dark. So it will not be visible of its surrounding, which is the infinite energy of God. And an impossible type of existence comes out, an existence that's truly swimming in its source, but has no clue that the source even exists. So what do you see from here? You see from here the incredible synthesis of the energy and the vessels. The vessels couldn't produce anything. The energy needs to produce. But on the other hand, the energy would produce a undesirable creation. So how does the energy produce a desirable creation that God has satisfaction of it? Is it creates through the vessels. So what do you see from here? That the vessels impart or imprint upon the energy its character. And what's its character? The character of concealment. That's what he's explaining over here. So let's read it inside. He says that the koyach husavus, the power to create, to ba'atzmas dafka, is only in the essence of God, like we discussed earlier. However, that is revealed and expressed, uba al yedei ha'or, it comes through the light. However, ma'or atzmai, from the light itself, arei ef shelius metzias yesh, you could not get to an existence that has substance, that feels itself. V'zeu inyan, and this is the idea of havaya echad. Havaya echad means that God is one. What does that mean? That means that havaya, now in general, let me just make one more introduction that's important over here. The various different names of God are referring to the various different levels of the divine manifestations, right? So in general, again, everything over here is very generally speaking. The name Havaya, God's four-letter name, Yud Kei Vav Kei, a more inner name, is a name that addresses and expresses the energy, the light. The name Elokim is the name of God that expresses the vessels, the containers. The name of Elokim is the name of the containers, the name of the Kalim, the name of the vessels. That's why Elokim is concealment, and Havaya is revelation. And when it comes to creation, what do we see? Who created? So in the initial story in Genesis, right at the beginning of creation, it says, Bereshis bara Elokim. Elokim created, implying that the creation came about through the vessels, through the constrictors. However, we would think it's only through the vessels. But later in the story of creation, it says, B'yoyim asois Havaya Elokim. It says, in the day that Havaya Elokim created, which means that the creation was a joint effort of Havaya and Elokim. So what he says now is an interesting thing. Everything is interesting, of course, it's mind-blowing. But he's saying like this: if the creations would have only been from Havaya, not through the joint with the name of Elokim, meaning to say, if God would employ only the lights without the vessels, then what kind of a creation would we have? We would have one that's called Echad, which means, Echad means oneness. That means that in all of creation, in all of the multiplicity, in all of the endless numbers of creations, we wouldn't feel the distinctions and the separations between creation and creation. Everything would be completely nullified into the oneness. The singular source would swallow everything into itself. You wouldn't even be able to detect the pieces, the parts, because everything would just be one in the oneness. And that reality is not only a hypothetical. It's not only if God would create the worlds through Havaya, then that's the way it would be. But rather it's an actual state. There is a deeper dimension of existence from God's perspective, where God is not recognizing Elokim, as if to say. He's not wearing the sunglasses of the name of Elokim. He's not wearing shades. He's not self-imposing a blockage on his own eyes. He's looking through the lens of Havaya, and God sees the creative power. He sees all of creation melted into him, and therefore there's only oneness. There's nothing other than him, with all the billions of people and plants and trees and animals and planets and stars and whatever, and galaxies, whatever there's out there. With all the multiplicity, you don't sense the multiplicity. All you sense is the singular oneness of God. Echad is the dominating element that is felt. That is the way it is from Havaya. But that's not the way we experience ourselves and the world. Why? Because Hashem doesn't create only through Havaya, He creates through Elokim. Havaya is filtered with the filter of Elokim. Let's read it inside. The Mitzat Shem Havaya, this is the meaning, he says, of Havaya Echad. The Mitzat Shem Havaya, sorry if there's a little noise, but I'm trying to. If the creations would be coming only attributed to Havaya, then all the worlds, Gam la'achar shenesavu, even after they came into existence, they're in a state of utmost and complete, utterly nullified. And that is, the Meshem Havaya Atzmai, because from the name of Havaya itself, you can't have the existence of the somethingness of the world. The Alkain, and therefore, Gam la'achar shenishavu, and therefore even after the worlds come into existence, Hareim betelim k'may kodim shenishavu, they're in the same state like before they were created. In other words, in as much as they are concerned, if you would speak to them, they wouldn't even know they exist. It's as if nothing happened. Although all of creation would have been produced, because we said earlier the light can produce, but what type of production would it be? A production that doesn't notice itself, a product that is lost in its source. So they would be exactly the same as if they were never created. Creation would have not have made even the tiniest dent in the oneness of God. That's had he created it only from Havaya. And on a deeper level, that's true now as well. It's just unknown to us. This dimension is not revealed to us. How could we have a world in the way we perceive it, that the world has real substance and we have self? And so Rak Mashem Elokim, that's because God employs the name of Elokim, which the name of Elokim, that's the vessels. The Shemesh U'Magen Havaya Elokim, because it is a verse in Psalms which says that the sun and its shield is Havaya and Elokim, which means that the two names of Havaya and the name of Elokim, these two names are like the sun and a shield. Today's days we know the ozone layer. What does that do? The sun's lights are too intense. If the sun would come to the world without the ozone layer, it would burn everything. It would be very dangerous. So there is a block that kind of weakens the rays of the sun. So the same is with Havaya and Elokim. If the two names of God, the sun is compared, the name Havaya, which are the lights, they're compared to the sun that generates this enormous amount of energy. And the name of Elokim is compared to this sheath, like a holder, a container, that weakens the revelation of the sun. What does that mean in its metaphoric? What does it represent in its divine form? It means that the creations do not feel the full power of the Creator. We're not privy to that revelation. God intentionally keeps it away from us. Shemaylam a master al Shem Havaya, that conceals and obscures the name of Havaya. And therefore, for that reason, the worlds can come into existence into a state of somethingness. Like it's explained in Tanya, in the second chapter, in the end of the fourth parak of Tanya. Which over there he says, that's the vessels, that conceal the light. But what do we see from all of this? Again, I'm not spending too much time on this, because he's bringing this idea over here as in a sense, almost a parenthetical idea. He's trying to bring out a point that since the light and the vessels are so compatible with each other and so synchronized, and the vessels absorb the light, the vessels are able to determine how the light will function and affect it. So the energy affects according to the manner of the vessels. And the reason for that is the reason for that is because the lights are in a state of complete absorption and enclovement in these vessels. That's why the vessels have the ability to affect the light. That the light should be in accordance to the vessel. So it would be similar, as we mentioned, like shining light through a green glass. The light will come out green. That's because the light is really passing through the vessel. It's being absorbed in the vessel and then going out. That's why the greenness of the glass is imparted on the light, and the same the redness of the other glass on the red light. Traffic light gives you this whole example. So the same is the interplay between the light and the vessels are what affect that the created energy of God creates and produces the world as we know it. Okay, even though it's a little shorter, we are going to stop over here because I just wanted to give at least some, and I guess there's enough to ponder what we just learned today for quite a while. And meanwhile, let us see Mashiach today.